What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. I'm Cameron Selby, and we're going to be breaking down our first look at the Week 4 NFL slate. It is an 11-gamer, so it should be a little fun. There's the chalk is kind of going away. There's not really obvious plays, and so I'm really excited to see what people build because these totals are kind of really even keel this week. Nothing's too crazy. Some of the highest totals are the biggest spread. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. If you want to continue collaborating with us, talking with us, discussing football with us, daily fantasy sports. He's killing with the college football content, and then Emery at some point will be returning, but he's going to be sprinkling in his thoughts from away off camera as we go forward for the next few weeks. So let's go ahead and jump right into the first look. All right, so jumping in, 5 highest totals on the week. Leading the way is the undefeated Indianapolis Colts. 49.5 total on the road, going against the Los Angeles Rams, who had a heartbreaking loss to Philly after being up 3 possessions, coming back after being down to kick the field goal, getting blocked as time expired, and then them running up the total to be one of the worst beats you can ever see. Following that, huge, interesting must-win game, almost for both teams in terms of just one seed viability. Baltimore Ravens, 1-2 after a shocking defeat at home on Monday Night Football against the Lions. On the road to go against the Kansas City Chiefs, who won their must-win game in a very eyesore-ish performance against the New York Giants at 48.5. Tied with that, and I think is the much more interesting games DFS-wise, Bears at Raiders, 48.5. Bears coming off a big win against the Cowboys, whereas the Raiders coming off a blowout loss in that regard to a backup quarterback in Marcus Mariota, but them being at home. But I expect some kind of back and forth with that one. Two defenses that have been very, very inconsistent and allowing fantasy production along the way. Big total and spread, 16.5 spread for the Bills hosting the Saints, but 47.5 will get you there. Tough, very nerve wracking. We saw Josh Allen completely just be not involved on a big blowout against the Jets a couple weeks ago. So very scary kind of games to invest in DFS wise, but very high total. Jacksonville 49ers runs up the top 5 with 47. Kind of sneaky game because 49ers defense has been solid. Jacksonville has given away a game, but they've been kind of pretty lackluster offensively thus far in the Liam Cohen tenure. So we'll see if that game ends up becoming a DFS magnet. But price wise, there's going to be some value there. Contrarian games to me, Commanders, Falcons, there's a ton of unknowns because Terry McLaurin went down with an injury, quad injury. He's uncertain to play. Jaden Daniels, they said if it's a playoff game, he would play, but maybe because of the blowout and the way that Marcus Mariota, his now 3-game sample size as the backup for the Washington Commanders, convincing wins and really kind of being very productive. Maybe they give him another week off and just kind of leave a lot of value on the board against a Falcons team that allowed 30 points and did not score a single one last week, looking to bounce back. And then the Panthers Patriots, another one that I think there's just nobody was really going to be interested in playing. But it does have some sneaky viability because we saw some fantasy production out of the Raiders against the Patriots. We saw a back and forth affair. And then 2 weeks ago against the Miami Dolphins, a back and forth affair where, Devon Achane gets there, Tyreek Hill does enough, Jalen Waddle, there's some sites there. There's opportunities to be had this slate for sure. In terms of injuries, situations to monitor, Xavier Worthy being 5,800, shoulder injury, he's missed the recent couple weeks, but he should return. That would be a big boost to a offense that once again just feels like it's a complete eyesore, and it's hard to just know what to do with them from a fantasy perspective week in, week out. But at the same time, we have not seen a strong enough sample size with Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice together. And obviously, we still need to wait a couple weeks for Rashee Rice to return from suspension and maybe making Kansas City stacks viable versus the Ravens, who Detroit just dropped 38 on them. Jackson Dart debuting as a starter. He was announced as a starter today in replace of Russell Wilson. And on top of that, Tyron Tracy is going to be missing a couple weeks. So Cam Scatterbo, he's the guy. It is Scatterbo season for sure. So 2 rookies out of the backfield for the Giants are going to be taking over this week. I mentioned earlier about the Jane Daniels and Terry McLaurin unknown statuses. On top of the unknown statuses with Brock Purdy, who started to practice a little bit last week, ended up missing the game, but I would anticipate him getting reps in as a starter. They would probably give him some run. this week if he's good to go. And then Juwan Jennings, who had a big game week 2, but then missed because of a shoulder injury. Guess he might have tweaked it. So his status is unknown, but when in his absence, Ricky Pearsall going for a 100-plus yard game. Christian McCaffrey being a target monster out of the backfield like he always is. So fun environment, especially against Jacksonville. And then Mike Evans going down with a hamstring injury once again, hosting Philly, 2 undefeated teams, Philly and Tampa Bay. And if it wasn't Emeka Egbuka's season already, it surely is now. He has the reins, and it's still unknown if and when Chris Godwin's going to be healthy and back. But with that said, even if he is back, he's not going to be close to 100%. And so Emeka Egbuka is going to be very, very popular because of the injury. And it'll be fun to see what we do and if we can fit him in some lines. Like Pierce, another guy I wanted to mention because he went down with a concussion, but he's been in these big threat guy. Michael Pittman's been pretty steady, 15 points a game so far throughout the season. Josh Downs kind of a disappointment thus far, but Alec Pierce having big games. He was knocked out of the game due to concussion, so if he's out, maybe that brings a buy low opportunity for Josh Downs, or Michael Pittman is just one of the better values on the slate, or maybe it's AD Mitchell has more opportunity because we've just been waiting for him to get on the field. But who knows? And then the last one I wanted to mention, Najee Harris, one of the weirder injuries, but tearing his Achilles coming out of his stance, heartbreaking because of dealing with the eye injury to start camp and being out in that unknown, and then Hampton starting off the season slow, but Najee Harris starting to ramp up and take games to where it would become of an even split, and then tearing his Achilles. So now is Summer and Hampton season, and so we'll be talking about him plenty this week. And then in terms of stacking options, we're going to go ahead and just kick it off with Josh Allen. He's as safe as they come. He's been incredible at just not even turning the ball over anymore. He used to be one of the just, it doesn't matter, we're just going to sling it. And now he'd rather just kind of throw it away. But he had a 42-point game in the comeback win against Baltimore, had the dud, and then Miami, they were playing from ahead, but very, very efficient. Didn't run a ton, but 3 touchdowns, no picks. And, his price is starting to go up a little bit finally. But the problem is just the volatility. If it's a blowout, can he get the upside performance, or is he just going to be stuck around 20 to 22? That probably won't get it done for 7,700, but he is in the pool. And then on top of that, because I would anticipate people being intrigued to play him, but Buffalo options, because of the unknowns everywhere on that team, it's really hard to trust the Keon Coleman, who outside of the fourth quarter in that comeback win has basically been a non-factor. Khalil Shakir, who has been okay, but then caught the touchdown last week to kind of put the game away, 14 and a half. He had 12 and a half, but he was the wide receiver 3 in terms of fantasy output in week 1. And then a big dud in a blowout win. So I don't know, but nobody really is confident in playing this. It is a welcome insight to see that Dalton Kincaid becoming more consistent. Maybe we were just a year early. But the thing is, he's starting to get the consistent workloads. 4 opportunities, but caught all 4 in week 1, and the score. 6 opportunities each of the last 2 weeks, and then catching a touchdown. Almost caught a second one as well. So 4,500. Everybody's cheap, reasonable price. They're going to be low owned, but it's worth mentioning because if Josh Allen gets there, he's going to get there by throwing passing touchdowns as well. All those are really interesting values and ways to get different. Lamar Jackson, who quietly, just once again, excellent. 9 touchdowns, 0 picks through 2 weeks. He had a 4 touchdown performance against Cleveland in week 2, and then in a comeback effort against Detroit on Monday night, going with 27, dropping it. We haven't really seen the just ton of running attempts like we used to see, like flirting with double digits every week because Derrick Henry is now in the fold. But Kansas City susceptible to some high scoring games. Obviously, Justin Herbert went absolutely bananas week 1 against Kansas City, and then week 2 was just I don't even know what to make of that. That was such a uninteresting game to watch in a Super Bowl rematch if there ever would be one of those scenarios. Jalen Hurts did not go off, but they just pushed their way around to a victory, a low scoring victory. So with Baltimore, Kansas City being a possible shootout, I think it's on the board that Baltimore is just a very interesting stat to get to. And because of Zay Flowers going off the first 2 weeks, getting 9 and 11 opportunities, so we're like, oh, he's finally a consistent receiver. And then had no catches, no targets in the first half. Had 2 catches, 13 yards in a game where they scored 30 in a good matchup. Being 6,700, I feel like because of that recent performance, nobody's going to play him. So he'll probably be under 10%, maybe even under 5, based on the price point. And then the other guys, you talk about Rashad Bateman finally having a big game, 17 points. Mark Andrews is probably the most notable on the same side because he had a really terrible start to the year, having a catch for 2 yards and a catch for 5 yards, and then goes for 691 and 2 touchdowns. And it's just like, what are we doing every single week with him? But Isaiah Likely getting closer to returning. He has a Q tab. I think that really just kind of takes a dig, if there wasn't already, at the consistency of Mark Andrews. But I think he's pretty close. So if he returns, for 3,300, I guess he's in the pool, but I probably don't really trust it. Either way, another high volatile play. But the difference is between Josh Allen and Lamar is that at least you not only save $200, but you also have a game script and environment that will be a lot closer to where either it stays close, Lamar is going to be putting up points, or he'll be at least involved on any kind of scoring opportunity. But another guy I wanted to mention, we're going to go down a couple $100, but Justin Herbert, man, if there's somebody that has been an MVP performer, helping his odds significantly, it's been Justin Herbert through 3 weeks. Put up 30 plus fantasy points in a neutral site game against Kansas City. 3 touchdowns, no picks the following week. Gross, ugly game, but 2 touchdowns. Got there with 20 fantasy points in terms of being a DFS play on the showdown slate on Monday night. And then last week, obviously, that was his dud game. But 47 pass attempts? Are we getting to the Justin Herbert just dinking and dunking and getting there with any which way possible now? Only scored 1 touchdown, but got to 300 yards. And so, he's been the steady 18 and a half or more each of the first 3 weeks. And then now is inheriting a matchup against the Giants, who are bottom 10 against quarterbacks. They are going to be touchdown favorites probably this week, and debuting against a rookie player there. Hopefully the Giants, being in the 0-3 situation, quarterback change will be a little bit more energized to keep the game close a little bit. And if it does remain close and it's not an immediate blowout from the jump, Justin Herbert should be a very strong option and pretty decently priced as well. The Mahomes question is just going to be one that I'm going to be wrestling with all week. The problem is that I hate all of his pass catching options until Xavier Worthy returns and is healthy. But even if he does return this week, do you really want to spend $5,800 for a skinny receiver that could be hurt on any play after getting hurt by his own teammate? I don't really know if I know the answer to that, but I do know that Patrick Mahomes, at least 2 of the first 3 games, has been very productive from a fantasy perspective. Most of that was rushing upside, going for 57 and 66 rushing yards respectively. Last week, playing from ahead, they couldn't convert red zone opportunities, and just really ugly, unwatchable game almost. But 6,000 against Baltimore. We saw Baltimore on Monday night just get dropped and nuked on against the Lions. Most of that be coming from the rushing game, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that Pat can't get there as well, because Kansas City's running game has probably been one of the most disappointing units in all of football thus far this year. Isaiah Pacheco is absolutely a shell, and until they give Brashard Smith the role, I don't really know what to make of them, and I will not be investing in that at all unless I have to on a cheap on Slate. But the thing is, I don't really know who to stack him with. Everybody's reasonably priced. But Hollywood Brown without Xavier Worthy, without Rashee Rice, 2 games, complete duds on both games. Travis Kelce the same. Tyquan Thornton is actually a guy that's interesting, especially if Xavier Worthy doesn't play, because he's been at least a very serviceable deep threat in each of the last 2 weeks, catching 2 for 59 and a score in week 2, and then in week 3, 9 targets. I think that led the team. 5 for 71 and a score. And he actually had a deep ball get called back, and then the very next play end up catching a second deep ball to set themselves up to score at some point in the middle of the game. So $4,000 if I mean, if Xavier Worthy's out, $4,000, that might be my stack. I might just do a single if I'm doing Patrick Mahomes, but because of the unsexy pass catching options, once again, it's a common theme for these really solid quarterbacks. But top 4 matchup, everybody hates their pass catching options, so it's a way to get different. But my boy Caleb Williams finally had his breakout game. 4 touchdowns against the Cowboys, extended the play in fields. first flawless game so far. He has 27 touchdowns and 5 picks since week 3 of last year. So even though a lot of people are talking down on him, he's been quietly excellent. He just is waiting for good coaching, and they had a big statement win. Now they're going to what I would consider a pick 'em against the Raiders. But the Raiders just allowed Marcus Mariota to get there with over 22 fantasy points. Possibly could have been even more if they weren't so bad and were in the game. But with that said, Caleb Williams, $5,800 until his price just goes up above 65. I don't know if it'll ever get there, but he's still below 6,000, and so I'm just gonna keep clicking his name, to be honest with you. Rome Odunze, man, all 3 games, touchdown. 4 touchdowns in 3 games. He caught one early in week 3, and really Caleb kind of spread things out a lot, and a lot of it was relying on big explosive plays more so than long sustaining drives. Rome didn't really have the explosion game like he did in week 2, but he got there. But his price jumps $1,000. Maybe that makes him, instead of one of the chalkiest plays on the entire slate, maybe people are like, well, I don't really want to play him for 63. I don't think he's going to score in 4 straight games, should he? Well, I mean, the matchup's there. We saw the Raiders just be bottom 3 so far against receivers. Their secondary is atrocious. The only one that really didn't take advantage of it was New England, but we still saw Kayshon Boutte get there for 6, I think 103 in a score in week 1. Week 2, the Chargers, we saw Quentin Johnson catch a long touchdown deep ball. Keenan Allen caught a touchdown as well. And then last week, Terry McLaurin was robbed of a touchdown on his quad injury, but he caught a deep ball. And then, Washington, you didn't expect a ton of high passing volume from Marcus Mariota, but I will expect that from Caleb Williams. So he is in the pool. DJ Moore, who finally scored and had a not complete dud of a game, even though he only had 21 receiving yards, 28 total yards, but they're going to try to keep him involved and with opportunities. So 5,600, tough. I don't think a lot of people are going to be going in the direction of double stacking, but that bringing back with a cheap Jacoby Myers or the only stud tight end and Brock Bowers on the slate, I think is in the pool. And that kind of speaks to one of the value quarterbacks on the slate, which is Geno Smith. 5,400, once again, decent matchup. I really like this game, Chicago and the Raiders, but so far Chicago bottom 3 against quarterbacks. Geno's kind of been up and down so far. I mean, he had a fine game against the Patriots in bad weather, but go for 360 is what you want to see from a fantasy perspective. Then the following week, just awful game against the Chargers, but it's the Chargers. I understand it. But then last week, even in a blowout where they were down 3 possessions a lot of the second half, 3 touchdowns, almost got to that 300-yard bonus salvaging, but 26 fantasy points after that 3 touchdown game. So, and that is without a lot of that going to his big games and targets with Jacoby Myers. Brock Bowers hasn't looked like himself, but Michael Mayer was concussed. I would anticipate because of the scariness of that injury, he wouldn't be playing, but we won't know that till later in the week. Either way, Brock Bowers, who has always been kind of a 50 to 60% of the snaps because he lines up more out wide than he does at tight end. I mean, they're going to have to force him to do more of those roles and opportunities if Michael Mayer is not present in the game. But even when he was uncertain to play, he still had 8 targets against the Chargers. They just couldn't get anything going. And then last week, obviously it's a dud game, but he caught a 2-point conversion. 9.8 isn't going to get the job done at 5,800 because he's the only true stud tight end on the slate. I don't fault you for picking up to him. And then the last guy, and this is pukey, I'm not going to lie. Michael Penix Jr., 5,100, complete dud. I don't know even what to make of this. Minnesota, because Raheem Morris saying that they wanted to establish the run, get it going. Bijan having over 150 yards, did just that, and he was incredible. Michael Penix didn't have to do a ton. Plus, it was a tough matchup, but that is not exciting at all. 5 fantasy points in a win for a quarterback. But then last week, even in garbage time, he looked truly awful against the Carolina Panthers, who gave up a ton of production to Arizona. And Carolina also the week before that, Jacksonville put up a ton what they wanted. They blew them out. So it wasn't a great fantasy game from the skill players of Jacksonville outside of Travis Etienne. But Michael Penix, what are you going to do, man? Like, you were in a deep quarterback class. A lot of people showing success early on, and you were the guy that had to wait the longest outside of JJ because JJ was his job until he got hurt. So he missed the entire rookie year. But then Michael Penix had to wait until Kirk Cousins got benched late in the season last year. Did fine, but didn't do anything to just be like, the Falcons, I think they made the right move by spending $150 million guaranteed on a quarterback, and then that same offseason drafting one in the top 8. Didn't make any sense then, still doesn't now. But at the end of the day, this is not necessarily a must win, but this is a must play well Michael Penix game. And we saw in week 1 where he actually was very productive, finishing with 24 fantasy points. If he did that at 5,100, that's really going to bode well for you. I would anticipate low ownership because of back-to-back 6 or less fantasy point games. But he had some rushing upside, threw the ball well, almost got to the bonus. 40 passing attempts is what you want to see. The week before, they were just kind of playing an ugly game from ahead, so it got to 21. That wasn't exciting. Last week, he would have gotten over 40 passing attempts had he not got benched, and it wasn't 30 to freaking 0. You should never be losing 30 to 0 against the Carolina Panthers, especially this version of them. But in terms of his pass catching options, everybody's kind of getting cheaper and cheaper, and I'm waiting for that breakout. Drake London has been a target hog in the games that he's played. He was one of my plays of the week in week 1, had 15 opportunities, 8 catches, 55 yards, was pretty gross, but he dropped 2 touchdowns before going down and finishing the game on the bench with the shoulder injury. Week 2 was kind of a wash because they didn't pass it a ton. And then last week, 5 for 55 led the team, but it was just a very atrocious performance. So I don't really know what to make of it. But his price has dipped $800 since week 1, just like that. And Washington, we saw Trey Tucker go for 40 last week. Jacoby Myers wasn't really entirely involved, but early on caught a big deep ball. The Commanders' defense is one to be had. And at $5,700, I think a lot of people are going to be flocking to a Ricky Pearsall, a Teteroa McMillan, and all of these guys. Quentin Johnston is another one. Jacoby Myers. DJ Moore even might pull close to 10% ownership. And even if I scroll up a little bit, Debo could be playing without Terry, so he'll be a popular option. So he's kind of smack dab in the middle. Riley has one of the better matchups, 5,700. I'm waiting for a breakout game. I think one of them in terms of Kyle Pitts, who was honestly looked pretty good. He hasn't had a breakout game in terms of fantasy production, but I've enjoyed watching him play so far. He doesn't look like he's giving up plays. He looks pretty steady, spry, healthy, which he hasn't each of the last 2 years. So 12.9, very strong first week. And then weeks 2, he did really well in terms of his value as a showdown play. And then week 3, 7.9, pretty solid for a terrible game. But his price, even though he's been fine each of the first 3 weeks, keeps getting lower. Now he's $3,600. So I don't think his name is really going to pop out a ton. But again, it's the same matchup. So those guys, and then Darnell Mooney providing a spark last week, returning. He actually returned week 2, but last week was more of a huge return in terms of the usage that he got. He actually had 11 targets, caught 4 for 44, but 40. You can't tell me that you can't at least be flirting with the idea of a double stack bring back with Washington and Atlanta. Just because I don't think it'll be too highly owned. Running backs, I think, is very interesting. It's a small sample size, and some of these guys are matchup proof. But it is funny that the top 5 price running backs, 4 of them have a bottom 4 matchup. Christian McCaffrey, I know he's the guy that's matchup proof because Jacksonville, he's a statistic. 15 targets as a running back. 15 targets. What calf injury? The exact thing that we were hoping for in week 1 when he was one of our must plays and popped up late on the week with the injury. A lot of people went off, and I was like, I'm going to take some shares away, but I'm going to be over the field. I feel good about the matchup, and I'm not thinking they're going to shy away. And look, 10 targets, 22 carries. He just didn't score. The following week, kind of a dead performance for a game that they were playing from ahead the whole time, but he got there with 22.7, scored a receiving touchdown. And then last week against Arizona, where they were just kind of bottling him up in terms of carries, but 15 targets, 10 for 88. He didn't score and still got 24 fantasy points. So his price has jumped. He's the highest priced running back, and you gotta throw some interest in there. Bijan, another matchup proof guy that he's going to get 5 to 7, possibly even more targets every single week. So even though Washington has been better against the run than they have been in the past, that doesn't mean Bijan can be a part of your hypothetical Atlanta doubles if you want to go that route. Jahmyr Gibbs, another one that Cleveland's just bottling up running backs left and right this year. They're a really solid defense, but Detroit being big favorites at home, one would think that they try to establish a run game. Saquon's kind of been so-so through 3 weeks, 4 yards a carry or less, all 3 games. I mean, receiving upside is never really there. He actually has 2 games with 5 targets, but neither game, it's not like he popped off. But 7,600, he's just kind of lost in the shuffle right now. JT, one of our big plays last week, back-to-back games with over 32 fantasy points, had a big receiving production in week 2, 215 all-purpose yards against Denver, and then we ran it back with the well against Tennessee last week, ends up hitting the 100-yard bonus and 3 touchdowns. Early on, he was getting bottled up, and I thought once he scored a touchdown, I was like, this could be 17-point week because you're kind of running away with it. But no, he had a massive, might have been the play of the week in terms of his second touchdown, and then he punched one in. I think it was late in the third, early in the fourth, to really truly become the RB1 on the week. But Rams #1 against running backs so far. So it could be an inefficient game, but if he has all the workload, Derrick Henry just can't stop fumbling. 3 games, 3 fumbles. Had a huge game in week 1, but then week 2, we saw what Cleveland did to him. That's why it's a tough matchup for Jahmyr Gibbs, but completely bottled up. And then Detroit, I mean, I know they were playing from behind in the fourth, but it's not like it was behind, so they had to play catch up the entire game. So 12 opportunities wasn't exciting to see. Obviously, he's never been much of anything in terms of receiving outlook, but he caught but he had an early rushing touchdown, and then after that, he just kind of really didn't do anything. Mainly, James Cook is probably one of the more popular plays that's going to happen. 16.5-point favorite at home, and he's been freaking awesome. 21 plus fantasy points in every single game, and back-to-back games over 100 rushing yards. Back-to-back games over 20 opportunities, and we just weren't. The problem with him is that we didn't dislike him. We didn't like the fact that he was being drafted in the late third round, and he averaged 15 touches a game last year and like 50% of the snaps. We were just like, this, the touchdown doesn't really feel like it's meshing with what he's really putting out. But he's been him, and great matchup against New Orleans. We saw what Christian McCaffrey did, going over 20 fantasy points with him, and James Cook has that same upside. Problem is if they score 30, I could see there's going to be a game that Buffalo blows out, somebody scores 30, and he's not going to be involved and just has 10 points and is not going to get you there, because at this point, I don't see a scenario where he just is going to be consistently in the 6K. I think he's graduated to being in the elite tier of 7K plus running backs. And so with that said, he needs to be involved on scores. And so matchups there, home favorite, 5 box running back now. So he's the guy. He might be one of the most popular guys on the slate. Jumping down, this might be the official week of the rookie deep class of running backs. We raved about how great this running back class was. Got off to a little bit of a rocky start. We had a Quinshon Judkins late add to the team after dealing with his off the field allegations. Chingenti literally has more yards after contact than he does total yards on the season. 101% of his rushing yards is coming after contact. That is how atrocious it's been from a run blocking perspective. His price has dipped over $500. I think he started the year at 7K. And so now he's down to 62, being a home team against Chicago. I think, like I said, it's one of my favorite games to target. So I mentioned Geno Smith and the possible doubles and reasonably priced guys. But if you think this could be the Ginty week, he's had the opportunities. He's been very inefficient because of the horrible offensive line. Had 1 touchdown week 1, but just 2 yards to carry. But he will be a 5-box running back at some point in time. It just hasn't come into fruition. The breakout is coming. I think because of the poor performances recently, his ownership will be diluted. And so if he's less than 10% owned, it's either a pick him or the Raiders are slightly favored. So against Chicago, I think it could be a shootout, and Ginty could get to his 20-point finally game for the first time in his young career. Chuba Hubbard and Alvin Kamara are going to live in the low 6K range all year. Both fine matchups. Kamara, he's been just kind of okay in games that were close. 21 carries, 99 yards, and then also 6 targets. So 27 opportunities, 120 yards. He just didn't score. But in the games that were blowouts, obviously the Arizona game looked closer than it was at the end of the game. But he basically was saved by the touchdown. And then last week, he actually got to 20 opportunities, but got shut down by Seattle. So being a 16.5-point dog on the road, tough to invest in for me this week. But Chuba Hubbard, one of the safer RB2s. Last week he didn't score to get there, but every week, if you believe in Carolina trending after winning 30-0, that could be a fine play for low ownership. Martin Hampton might be a chalky play, but he was my 1% call of the week last week. And this obviously Najee Harris going down had a factor in him getting 26 opportunities. But I thought it was a buy low opportunity for him. He was kind of smack dab right in the middle of a chalky Jordan Mason, chalky Kenneth Walker, and I was like 5,600. We saw what JT did against Indy, and that doesn't mean he has to go for 215 all-purpose yards, but he could get there. And he finally scored his first touchdown. He had 59 yards receiving. We saw him be a 2,000-yard all-purpose back in back-to-back seasons with North Carolina, and he had a lot of receiving work as well. With that said, 5,900 slight price increase, but outside of the Giants playing the worst run attack in football in Kansas City, they have given up a lot of rushing yards and opportunities this year. They gave up over 180 to Washington. And then in week 2, we also saw Javonte Williams go for his best fantasy performance of the season so far. So he's got the matchup. I think he'll have another 20 opportunity game. The problem is his ownership is probably going to be 15 to 20% now. But I'm okay with that because I think this is a very unique slate where ownership is going to be pretty spread out otherwise. But I mentioned other rookie running backs. Quinshon Judkins, man, they did not mess around with saying that they wanted him to be the starter. Week 2, low snap count, but he still had a very efficient performance, but then was very cheap. Touchdown dog against Green Bay last week, but then had 94 rush yards, scored a touchdown, 16.5 fantasy points. His price has jumped up a little bit. Tough matchup because it's going against Detroit. We saw them bottle up Derrick Henry, but 5,500, he's going to be below 6K for a couple weeks before he truly takes off. But he's already, after 3 weeks, 55% of the snaps. It's going to gradually increase. And if he completely phased out Dylan Sampson, who led the team in receptions week 1 with 8 and then just 1 touch week 3, they're going to want to get him the ball. So going forward, he's going to be somebody to mess with. I don't know if this is the week, but at the same time, the opportunity and volume is there. I mentioned Cam Scottaboo, Tyron Tracy is going to miss a couple of weeks with a shoulder injury, and he on Sunday Night Football was the only positive note for the New York Giants. He had 24 fantasy points, 8 targets, 6 for 61, ended up getting their 24.1 fantasy points. So his price has jumped up $500. But if you think that in spite of a tough matchup, the Giants with the quarterback change are going to be playing with a little bit more energy, and he's going to be involved because he has all the upside and opportunity being the guy going forward, I think it's worth mentioning. And then I don't know if he's going to be a 1%er play, but I just want to point out TreVeyon Henderson. Obviously, he's not gotten there. He's been really bad pass blocking, and I think that's what's kind of limited his snaps so far. But the difference is he doesn't fumble the ball. He's known for not fumbling the ball. He's really good at his ball security. And Ramondre Stevenson is not. And so he had a fumble at the goal line to potentially tie the game. And also Antonio Gibson also fumbled in the Pittsburgh Steelers game. After that point, TreVeyon Henderson had 80+% of the snaps the rest of the way. Obviously was inefficient with his touches, but he went from 11 opportunities down to 5 the following week, and then now 14. So his price has dipped all the way to 52 at home against Carolina. Sneaky decent matchup. He's not a 5-box running back yet, but I just want to see him get back to a 50-50 split, or he gets 50. The other two split the 50 to where he can start gradually increasing to the 15 to safe floor of touches every single week. The breakout is coming at some point with him as a fantasy asset. It just hasn't arrived yet. So I think because of the fact that you have all these guys, these other rookies I mentioned previously, Omarion Hampton without Najee Harris, Cam Scottaboo without Tyron Tracy, Quinshon Judkins kind of inheriting just a workhorse role so suddenly, Ja'Cory Cross-Gamera without Austin Eckler, all these rookie running backs, and at some point, TreVeyon Henderson, he's going to be a buy low opportunity. It could be this week. I'm going to have to wrestle with that decision in my fantasy lineups, but that is just worth noting. But with that said, I think it'll be a fun thing to just kind of get into some lineup builds. Let's go ahead and we're going to start off with a mid-tier quarterback. I'm going to start off with Caleb Williams. Still under 6K, and I'm just fine going to the well with him. I'm going to stay with Rome Odunze right here. I think I'll just continue to ride with DJ Moore for the time being. Bring back is very interesting just because of the fact that I like Jacoby, I like Brock Bowers, and I like Ashton Jeanty. I don't know if this is a slate I want to just fill out my entire receiving group from this room. Let's just try to do a buy low with Ashton Jeanty. I want to live in this mid-tier range at running back. I told you about all these dominant running backs. No I know a lot of them are matchup proof, but they're kind of getting expensive. We're kind of losing some value. Ownership's going to be spread out. And I think I want to ride with some of the rookies this week. So I'm going to put in him. Feel a lot safer about Omar and Hampton, obviously, this week being $300 cheaper, better matchup. And on top of that, coming off a big breakout performance. In terms of defense, I always like playing a cheap defense. I went through and there's nothing in a ton that stand out. Buffalo's defense has not been great. 2 games, 2 fantasy points or less. Had a 10-pointer against the Jets. But obviously was knocked out of the game due to a concussion. 3,700 is pretty pricey. So I'm probably going to stay away from that. I do like the fact that Tennessee, they're coming off a game where they just allowed 41 against the Colts, who are humming right now. But the Houston Texans are not. Houston has not even scored 19 points so far this season. CJ Stroud, what he's kind of become, I know their line is not the same, but he just kind of feels like just a guy. And obviously after that historical rookie season, winning a playoff game and doing what he did, turning that franchise around from having the second worst record to all of a sudden having, a playoff divisional round appearance, was nothing to sneeze at. Even though they did repeat that success from a record and playoff win perspective last year, fantasy wise, it has not been the thing. And I know last week one of my tournament plays was Nico Collins due to his recent success against the Jags. He did have a costly fumble at the end, but he did get there with his big game with 26 fantasy points. Another good matchup. Bottom 5 against wide receivers is the Tennessee Titans. At home, must win. 0-3. You cannot drop to 0-4 and then have a second divisional loss, especially if this one's at home. I don't expect Houston to score more than 20 real life points. If that's Tennessee being the lowest total on the slate, $2,300 seems like a pretty solid bargain to me. Defense absolutely kicked my ass last week. There were 8 special teams or defensive touchdowns. I had about 5 defenses, and not a single one of them had one of those defensive touchdowns. And it was very frustrating. On top of that, the CD injury just kind of really killed my day. Hopefully, the defense gets back on track because I know it is very random and volatile. But Tennessee, week 1, pulling it up one more time. Minimum price against Denver. Got there with 10 fantasy points. That's excellent outlook for a cheap defense. 4 might still be fine for you depending on what you're trying to spend on, but they got 4 in spite of allowing 33 points. I don't think many people are going to be on them, but it allows you to afford whatever you want. In terms of tight end, I mean, I don't really have a dog in the fight in terms of who I want. I'm completely on board with if I'm doing Caleb Williams stacks, if I'm doing the bring back, if being Brock Bowers, because he does have the highest ceiling of any tight end, but at the same time, he just doesn't look like himself right now because of his knee injury that he's kind of dealing with. So I'm fine getting away with him from him going cheap. Apparently, Juwan Johnson, I just want to point this out. Apparently, he's just a weekly just get at tight end right now. 12, 9, and 8 targets in each of the first 3 weeks to have a 15-point, 15-point, and 11-point fantasy game and output. If that's going to be his upside every single week, it's too cheap. They are playing the team that's number 1 against tight ends. Obviously, if there's, not only is it a small sample size, if there is any opponent rank to ignore, it is tight end, because some don't use tight ends at all. Some use them all the time. For example, the Cincinnati Bengals allowed 10 opportunities and receptions to Harold Fenton and Njoku in week 1, and because of that, they're one of the bottom teams against tight ends, and that's just kind of a weird thing. I think living down here might be a buy low opportunity for a David Njoku, who's been fine. He just hasn't scored, but roughly 40 yards every single week. Kyle Pitts is kind of speaking to me at this price point. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to go all in on a Kyle Pitts by any stretch of the imagination, but 3,600 just feels like a solid spot. Hunter Henry, of course, the week I play him, has 1.9 fantasy points, and then the week I don't, he goes for 29. Go figure. That's how fantasy works, I guess. I think I have an idea. So Tyler Warren, he was kind of limited last week in terms of practice, and he ended up playing. They won by a lot, and he wasn't involved on any of the touchdowns. He's still looking for his first touchdown in the NFL. But the first 2 weeks, 76 and 79 receiving yards respectively. He has rushing attempt upside as well. So 4,600 is fine, and it is the highest total on the slate. So I think it's a thing to possibly get to. And then with that said, you're talking about a bring back in that kind of skinny. Puka Nacua has been just awesome. He scored 2 of the first 3 games, but he's getting 16 opportunities, in a solid matchup against Philly. The week before, didn't get the 100-yard bonus, but had a 45-yard rushing touchdown. Still hit his over on his prop. Then 10 out of 11 targets for 130. Also had a rushing attempt in week 1. So at least 25 fantasy points every week. He's still under 8,000. Problem is, he's probably going to be the most popular guy on the slate. I would anticipate a a lot of people wanted to fit him in. So I just want to point that out. But with that said, that's $5,400 left. You can kind of do a lot of weird things. Keenan Allen has been as steady as they come. 19.8, 17.1, 19.5, scored in all 3 games in his return to LA. At some point, that is going to drop to where he has the 10-point floor. But it is very encouraging to see him just instantly rekindle that chemistry that he had with Justin Herbert a few years prior. And then Jacoby Myers, I mentioned as well as a possible running back. I don't want to do 2 Raiders in this build. Last guy in is kind of tough. Trayvon Henderson, want to play some, not all. What can we get? What can we do? I have an idea. Do this. We're going to go down at running back, and we're going to go and put in Cam Skattebo. Interesting name. Basically play both rookies in the same game, both under 6,000 bargain prices, and see what can happen. That leaves 6,100 remainder. I would anticipate Terry McLaurin's going to miss this week. J. Terrell is out recently, so I know they are bottom or top 4 against receivers so far this year, but 6,000 if Terry McLaurin's not playing. Debo might be a little popular, but very interesting name to get to. So that's a solid first look. Let's try another build. Let's clear. And I want to do a dominant quarterback. So because of the fact that the Baltimore and Kansas City game is going to be much closer and competitive because both teams are 1 and 2, almost in not necessarily must-win territory. I still think both teams will easily make the playoffs, but this could be a elimination from the 1 seed territory for both teams, especially if Baltimore has losses against Buffalo and Kansas City. That does not bode well for their tiebreaker purposes. So let's start with the Lamar build. And then in terms of his stackable options, it's pretty freaking gross. I'm not going to lie to you. Even though Zay Flowers had a dud, he could be low owned. And because of his 11 opportunities week 1, 12 opportunities week 2, maybe he gets back to that in a slightly better matchup. I mean, it's not even a slightly better matchup. I don't even know what the hell happened. But Zay Flowers, let's just put him in and see what happens. I don't really know if you need to double stack. Rashad Bateman, like I said, finally had a breakout game, but 3 points or less the other 2 weeks. DeAndre Hopkins has not played a ton, but he had a touchdown each of the first 2 weeks, 2 targets a game. 4,500 does not excite me whatsoever. But let's say for practice, because I like building structurally. Let's say Mark Andrews builds off of what the momentum of he has, and he gets back to a 10-point floor. Bring back options, I don't know what the hell to do, but because he's low owned and maybe he provides upside, let's pretend Xavier Worthy's going to play, and he is in. Doesn't make me feel good whatsoever, but it's a game environment, one of the higher totals. Nobody wants to play it in terms of the pass catchers. So I don't really know how the ownership's going to go, but usually high totals are kind of reflect ownership. And I don't know if that'll be the case in this one. And being a 3:00 game, a lot of ability to late swap and adjust if you need to later on. I'm going to put Omari Hampton back in. It's going to be just kind of an easy click for me on most of these lines that I build. And then other running back, it's kind of tough. I kind of rather get up to other receivers than expensive running backs this week. I'm going to be honest with you. So with that said, I ended up fading GT in the last one. Let's force him in on this one, and then 100 short of what I wanted to do. But let's say Ricky Pearsall, once again another solid matchup. Say that Juwan Jennings is going to miss. That leaves you 5,600 that you can put in any of these rookie running backs. You can put in Quentin Johnston, who's been awesome as well. Keon Coleman, nobody's going to play him, but is what it is. DJ Moore, kind of the same game environment that I told you I liked. And it brings back with the Ashton Jeanty play as well. So that's one more look. And then one more look before we get out of here. I'm going to try a Justin Herbert build because I really, really like how cheap he is and how well he's played so far this week. I still think it's too cheap. And then let's get a little different because I think a lot of people are going to play Cam Skattebo because he's just 5,500 without Tyron Tracy. A lot of people are going to be playing Omari and Hampton because he's under 6,000. Najee Harris is gone. So let's be a little different on this one. And we're going to stack and double stack with the bring back with this game and these pass catchers. So Elite Neighbors, big game week 2, huge disappointment week 3. Just inexcusable to not get him the ball and have him having a healthy game where he only has 13 yards. But 40 won the week before. Obviously, that's a much better matchup. It's an okay matchup against the Chargers, but nothing to sneeze at. I think an interesting name is just Lad McConkey. I know he's been a complete dud so far. Quentin Johnston's been catching the deep balls. Keenan Allen scored every single game. But Ladd McConkey is still 65. I don't think anybody wants to play him. And him being 65 in a weird price point, I think is a reasonable way to start your double. And then pick your favorite. I don't really know. I don't really care. Keenan Allen's been steady and solid. Quentin Johnston's been steady and solid. Each of them scoring at least 14 fantasy points in each of the first 3 weeks, both having 3 touchdowns so far. Let's say Keenan Allen to save $200 more. Like I said, I think both running backs in this game are going to be more popular, so you're being a little bit contrarian by doing a double bring back without either running back in this game. Tight end wise, I'm going to force Kyle Pitts in this one. I'm sorry. Don't make fun of me. It is what it is. Tennessee defense, I don't want to go 100% to, but it's just really easy to afford things that you want to at later points. 6,300 is a pretty solid amount left for this kind of week. Let's put in, I don't know if there's really a chalky guy because we're fading Hampton and Scottaboo. We're forcing a fade on this one. So let's go Genty. And then let's see what we want to do at flex, and then we'll figure it out. One name I wanted to mention because Mike Evans is expected to miss multiple weeks with a hamstring injury. Emeka Ibuka already being a stud, but even if Chris Godwin comes back, he's going to inherit all the workload, and it's going to be a very telltale sign of can he just completely be dominant when Mike Evans and or Chris Godwin are out week in, week out, or is he going to be a little bit more inconsistent? I don't really know the answer to that, but 6,800, it's a price you got to pay to find out. So he's worth mentioning in this line. I like clicking on his name. It's a correlated bring back with Ashton Genty. That leaves you with 6,500. You got a home 5-box running back, Kyren Williams against the Colts. Both 2-3-0 teams. Kyren hasn't had strong matchups so far. Like Houston, really solid against running backs. And then last week, Philly were worse against the pass than they are the run. But he's got 2 touchdowns. He's just a very steady guy. 6,300. I think it's his cheapest or tied for the cheapest so far this season. So if he's last guy in a high total game at home, other guys, like I mentioned, I wanted to get to up top. I want to have some lines with Nico Collins because he finally had a breakout game, and Houston must win once again. I told you last week, if CJ Stroud can't break out against the Jacksonville defense, he won't ever until further notice. And once again, having another fantasy dud, I'm done with him, but that doesn't mean Nico Collins can't pop off by himself. So he's a name I want to get to. Obviously, Puka Nacua, he might be the most popular guy on the slate because of his high floor. I think I'm going to take a stand on these running backs and say I'm going to probably just put all my eggs into one basket with one of these 5, and I don't know that answer yet. I kind of lean towards CMC, but he's really freaking expensive at 8,500 in a not great matchup. But Nico Collins, St. Brown steady. James Cook, kind of a little bit nerve-wracking because of the blowout potential, but he's there as well. And then Emeka going down, you got some weird opportunities. It's not like there's a ton of just chalky chalk other than the mid 5K range at running back. Before we do get out of here and I do my outro, I'm going to talk about our props of the week. Once again, hitting mine last week, going 2-1 to start the year on those. Emory, because of the blowout of Indianapolis, Tyler Warren didn't quite get there. He was really close. I think he was 7 yards short. But we're going to run it back. The problem is, or not even necessarily a problem, you're going to have to get up early if you're going to do it last minute because both of our props are in the 8:30 a.m. game that is going to be played in Dublin, Ireland between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Minnesota Vikings on different sides. He is actually going to be going with Jalen Warren over 21.5 receiving yards. He's hit that in all 3 games so far this season, and Caleb Johnson was a healthy inactive last week, and so is him and Kenneth Gainwell. And so Minnesota has been solid, but they got gashed by Bijan Robinson a couple weeks ago, and I think 3 for 3 is a pretty strong way to be confident. I'm going to run back mine with TJ Hawkinson. 34.5 receiving yards. He had 2 back-to-back duds to start the season, but then last week I was kind of flirting with the idea of doing Minnesota doubles. They basically did too well, essentially going up 41-3 early in the game because just back-to-back turnovers and just complete momentum shift and change. It was incredible to watch, but frustrating because I was really hoping that some Minnesota doubles would work out. Justin Jefferson did fine. But TJ, in spite of being up plus points, still had receiving yards in the second half, caught his first touchdown of the year, ended with about 18 fantasy points, but clearly got over his over. And in a matchup where Pittsburgh has been gashed themselves defensively so far this year, his prop didn't change. It's still 34.5. Carson Wentz looked like he was going to him. He didn't have to throw a ton last week, but much higher target share with Carson Wentz than he did with JJ McCarthy. So I'm going to run it back. I've been kind of nailing the tight end prop so far this year. And so hopefully that one doesn't go up too high, because last week my prop of the week was Caleb Williams. And then 2 days later, before the video was even released, it went up 20 yards. So I had to pick another one, and it was Kenneth Walker. But then Zach Charbonnet, late addition to the injury report, missed the game, and then he went up 20 yards. And that one ended up missing. So I guess that was a good, that wasn't technically our prop of the week. But I ended up going with TJ. Hit. I'm going to run it back, say the same thing if it's a similar prop, and he's going to get there. With that being said, I did run really long on this episode, but we appreciate you guys tuning in. That was a fun breakdown. Smaller slate this week, but high volatility in terms of just there's not a ton of complete chalk this week, because the prices are going up for the guys that have gone off so far. The prices are dipping for guys that have sucked, but usually people don't love buying low on guys. They're usually a week late to the party in terms of the ownership game. So it'd be fun to see later in the week how this really reflects. A lot of different ways to go this week. I think I'm done, or I'm not interested in doing the 20 max like I have been in recent weeks. I think I'll try to narrow my exposure a little bit to select guys, because I think you can do that with an 11-game slate. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please let us know what your must play is, who you're most excited about, who you're most confident in. If you do have a prop of the week, let us know. Again, in Discord, we talk about this all throughout the week and try to build the best lines we can. Football was tough this week, had some heartbreaking losses, but for the most part, hit pretty well on props, and so we want to keep that momentum going. Dusty killing it with the college football content. He's going to be showing some of his super dogs, props, and fun stuff. So really looking forward to seeing what happens this week with the fun football slate as well, or college football slate as well. So appreciate you if you've listened to this far, and we will see you guys on the next one. See you Sunday morning.